President Trump ramping up his attacks on calling the news media America's biggest enemy. I want to bring in now legendary investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, the author of Reporter. Seymour, I'm so happy you're on. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Glad to be here.
The president frequently complains about news organizations which challenge him. I mean, today's tweet was different in that he cited news organizations as the country's biggest enemy. What's your reaction to that?
Well, there's always been tension with every president. I sometimes think that we underestimate Trump, but that's just my opinion. I always like to tack the other way, I guess. But it seems to me that the news media, I always view disliking Trump as like catnip for American audiences. There seems obviously television is doing much better. I'm going to put my earpiece in better. You guys are getting better ratings. The newspapers, the New York papers and the Washington Post, they're getting more audience. And going after Trump is really good news. And I sometimes think that I just wish sometimes instead of so much about Trump and how awful he is, and there's certainly a lot of things not to like about him, I wish sometimes we'd talk more about what's going on in Yemen, about mothers having their children taken away at the border and all that. I wish that was more of a focus, but I can understand Trump is great for ratings. He just is, and that's just the reality. And so, it does, you know, presidents have always complained about the press, and the press have always complained about...
But to this extent, Seymour, I mean, it hasn't been like this to this extent. And I mean, we do talk about those issues, but I mean, this president and this administration, as you said, there's lots not to like. Listen, that's not for me to decide as a journalist, but there's lots of, even policy-wise, that this administration does, things that they do that are just sort of out there, and those things deserve to be talked about as well. It's not just about ratings.
Well, you know, the problem is, and I'm a contrarian. The problem is that he's going up in the ratings the more we complain about him. That is, and I complain about him too. Nobody likes his cabinet, those people, what's going on in the cabinet and the various divisions of the government, the mistreatment of people, the federal workers is outrageous. On the other hand, he's going up in ratings. And so I don't see the Democratic Party doing anything but basically running sort of as Hillary did, running against him for the last 2 months of the campaign. And I'm not sure that if I'm not in the major city in America, I'm not sure. This guy is different, and I think people are tired of politicians. And he appeals for a lot of reasons that maybe we don't all understand. I certainly don't understand him. He's got, what, 48%, 47% of the people. He appeals to them. There's something about him. This is a guy that took down 13 Republicans with about a history of, what, more than 200 years of political life.
So,
200 years of
Seymour, I get what
experience.
you're saying, but to me, I'm just listening, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're conflating the Democratic Party with the news media. It's not the news media's job to say, well, we're going to help him go up in the polls by talking about him. It's our job to analyze his policies and his behavior and what he says and what he does. That's our job.
You know, with all due respect, and I'm not talking about you or your show.
No, I know. I'm talking about the news in general. But
I think the public, we have a public right now. There was a time when the media was trusted. We go back to the old days of networks, and those days are long gone. When I worked at the New York Times, I always felt I was working for a newspaper. No matter what you said, where you were, it was trusted. We now have a situation where a lot of people tune in to what they like,
right, and
don't listen to what they don't like.
Right.
It's good for cable television on both sides, both for Fox News and CNN, MSNBC, and you guys. You've got great ratings. You're making money. I think the New York Times every quarter says it's picked up another 200,000 subscriptions because they're very critical of Trump. And so you have this notion, if you don't like Trump, you're going to go here. If you like Trump, you're going to go somewhere else. And where's the middle ground? Where is the media that is accepted? Where is the media that whatever they say is going to have some standing? It's not going to be tuned out by 40% of the people, whatever percentage. It just seems to me that at this rate, if I'm watching, yes, Trump went to the summit not knowing much about it, and yes, he doesn't read anything, and yes, he's famous for just running on instinct. But the guy, you know, I like golf, and I used to watch his goofy little golf show on Golf Channel before it had any audience. He's been in public life for 15, 20 years. There's just an outside chance. Well, yeah, maybe 20 years. There's an outside chance with all these tweets and all that other stuff. He just may have some idea what he's doing. He's keeping it focused on him, whether good or bad or otherwise. It works for him. And so I don't know if we're not all caught up in a pantomime that he's probably maybe doing better at running. He did get rid of two dynasties. He got rid of the Bushes first, and he got rid of the Clintons first.
Well, listen, I understand what you're saying there, but I think when someone attacks institutions, we can't normalize lying. We can't normalize bigotry. That's just not what America's about. We can't report on things that are favorable that the American people just want to hear all the time. And I'm talking about all news media, because then we would be derelict in our duties. So maybe it's different for you as a writer and an author, but as a journalist, I think most of the journalists that I know, we would take lower ratings and less money if this president actually believed in facts and reality. And so I'm going to have to disagree with you on that part of it.
Well, hey, of course. I'm saying.
But I got to get you to tell us about the book, though, because that's why you're here.
Let me just say one more point. The last thing I expect you to do is agree with me, and you're right. I mean, I'm just giving you a point of view,
right.
And I'm thinking about what's he going to do after the next election. I just worry that he just may be playing a longer game than we think.
Of course he is.
Okay.
We know that.
Fair enough.
I know that. Yeah.
Well, then we're all sort of falling in. It's his game. We're
Yeah.
playing his game.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me.
So okay. So listen, but I got to talk to you about your book, Reporter. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell us about it.
Well, what can you say? I've been a reporter for 50 years. I started as a police reporter in Chicago. I got famous, I guess, very early for doing the My Lai massacre story, and I was, I guess, a lone ranger. Some reviewer called me the lone wolf. But I went after a story that most of the major media did not go after. I worked at the New York Times for many years, and one of the problems I had, it's a love-hate, respect-anger relationship. One of the problems I had when I got to the New York Times in the early 70s, there was an enormous amount of respect for the presidency. And even Nixon, and it was very hard to cut through, even in the early days of Watergate, when the New York Times, as you know, was slow and the Washington Post did so well. Yes?
We talked so long and we went back and forth. I'm just going to tell everybody to buy your book. And if you have the opportunity to come back to talk more about your book, will you please take it? Because I want people to go out and buy Reporter, okay? This new memoir. But I'm up against the clock here, unfortunately.
At this point, I think it's more important to say what I say than worry about the book.
Thank you, Seymour. Always a pleasure. We'll see
Bye-bye.
you soon. That's it for us tonight. And before we leave you, here's a